Welcome back to the Whiskey and Wisdom Podcast with your constant co-host, Chris Kellum, and
I am Tyler Yaaw.
This week we bring on a special guest.
Catherine Yearwood.
Nice to meet you, Catherine.
Yes, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
This is one of the rare ones that we all just met right now.
Yeah.
So,
Hello.
yeah, it makes it fun that way.
I always learn so much on every one of these podcasts because I think one out of every 8 people I actually know.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting.
I feel like in Wilmington, everybody's connected by one person. So it's like,
Exactly.
oh, you know so-and-so, you know so-and-so. So, yeah.
Like we were talking about too, that's what makes Instagram fun too. It's like you know the one person and you're like, oh, it seems like they're doing something really neat over there connected with this person. Let me talk to that one as well.
Right,
So,
exactly. It's just a black hole of okay, I want to find out more.
yeah, exactly. So before we get too far into it, Chris, what are we sipping on today?
So this week we found a bottle of Russell's Reserve 10-year. Shout out to more of my family friends. Matt, thank you very much. So this 10-year has a classic amber and copper hue. On the nose, it'll be like orange peel and citrus with some butterscotch and maple notes. And taste should be rich, a little spicy caramel and vanilla flavors. So,
I definitely get butterscotch on the nose.
oh, for sure. But yeah, let's check it out. Cheers it up.
Cheers.
Cheers. I was already sipping on it.
That's good.
It's a bunch of flavors.
Understand why people like it.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
We had this one after the E.H. Taylor, so I just won't give my opinions because I'm
See,
comparing it to E.H. Taylor.
so this, I feel like flavor-wise is a little bit softer. Like it's very smooth with a little hint of a spice, where the E.H. Taylor does, I felt like, had a thicker mouthfeel.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she said. But they're both really good pieces.
You haven't even drank that much yet already. Chris is already making the jokes.
But yeah, we're drinking, having a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So born and raised in Wilmington and started let's see. I moved to California when I was 18
Oh, okay.
and was just going to community college and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and was just working at a surf shop while I was in community college, and quickly, realized, well, I should backtrack. I dropped out of high school.
Oh,
so that's always something that I used to try to hide all the time and not admit, but I'm like, that's a big part of my story.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I definitely, it caused a lot that I needed to overcome. So there's probably a lot I can say about that, but I will say that, from dropping out and realizing I just made a big mistake, this is going to set me back for the rest of my life, and trying to figure out how I was going to compensate and overcome and what my future was going to look like. That's why I moved to California, because I was like, I need a fresh start. I want to just get past all of, everything that had been happening. So that's why I moved to California, started community college, and then was like, yeah, school is not for me still. So I did a study abroad in Spain. I was like, oh, but travel will help, right?
Yeah.
So if you are studying and you're traveling abroad, that'll be. So yeah, it was a great experience. I grew up traveling. So other cultures really inspire me. And I felt like it was just such a great experience of, figuring out what I wanted my future to look like. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm here for school, but I realized I want to start a business. And so I'm going to drop out of school.
Yeah.
So coming back from Spain, I was like, okay, I'm dropping out of school. I'm going to figure out how to start a business. And of course, I'm a broke college student. I had no money. I have no experience owning a business, but I was pretty determined that was the only way that I was ever going to, be able to do something, is do it on my own. Because I always felt like nobody was going to see my value since I was a high school dropout.
Yeah.
So I was living with my sister at the time, working at the surf shop. And her and I decided that we wanted to start a juice bar. And I mean, this was way back. I mean, they're everywhere now, but this was back in the day when it was the health food craze was just starting. And there was actually nothing like what we wanted to do, which was fresh squeezed juices and wheatgrass and all of that kind of health side of things. So there was nothing like it in our area. And we're like, okay, this is definitely a niche we can fulfill. And so we were just looking for locations, obviously we had no money, we had no way, but we were just we're going to make this happen.
Make it work.
So yeah, we spent months doing a business plan and all of that. And then we finally found like this location. It was a restaurant, and there was this like kiosk on the like deck, and it was vacant and there was nothing there. So we went to the owner and like presented this plan that we were going to make him all this money with something that he's not making money with right now. So somehow he trusted us, and he was like, okay, I'll fund the business if, we'll split the profits, and we'll just pay you minimum wage until you're making profit, and then we'll split the profits. So we were like, this is great. This is a perfect opportunity. And it was awesome. It was so great because we learned so much about, pricing and advertising and marketing and reaching out to the community and getting people to understand our concept, because at the time it was still kind of new. So it was such a great experience, except I was like, I hate being in food.
I can imagine.
Even though this is just like fresh fruits and vegetables, I'm like, I can't do food all day long. This is not me. I just can't do it. So I was still actually working part-time at the surf shop, and they ended up promoting me to an assistant buyer, which was kind of a big deal at the time, because these surf shops in California are these big operations, and you normally had to be in fashion school and whatnot to get this type of opportunity. So it was like this thing that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're trusting me. Yeah. So I took the position. It was still somewhat part-time. So still working the juice bar and doing this part-time. And then 2 weeks in to being the assistant buyer, they fired the buyer and said, we want you to be the buyer. And I mean, I had no experience for this. I mean, this is all about budgets and numbers and, calculating the seasons. And so I had no experience, but they trusted me. And I was like, yes, I love the retail side, the fashion side of things. So I turned the juice bar over to my sister. I was like, I'm going in this direction. This is definitely what I love. So just threw myself into that. And it was like the quickest, fastest education that was like terrifying. I mean, I was crying every day.
Oh gosh.
I can only imagine.
There was a lot of expectation from the owners, and they had 2 stores, and like just figuring out it, like day by day was like, it's such an education. And it was really difficult. It was the first time that I felt like so extremely challenged, but challenged in a way that I wanted more. I was like, I love this. I want to learn all about this. So that was kind of my introduction into fashion, and going to trade shows and working, at a higher level in retail. And so I loved it. Met my husband. We ended up getting married. And then I would say, yes, the first year that we were married, he ended up getting an opportunity to be an East Coast director for this surf ministry. Cool. And they were doing a movie on a guy that was from the Outer Banks. And so they wanted somebody who could be on the East Coast and had East Coast connections. And they were like, well, obviously, and the movie was actually about some of my friends. So they were like, obviously we were going to be the ones to be transferred to the East Coast. And it was meant to be for like 6 months to a year to set up this tour, because we would tour the country and then tour the world with the movie.
Oh, that's nice.
So we were meant to move to Wrightsville Beach and kind of like that would be our base and set up the tour. So this was our first year being married, and he was traveling like 180 days out of the year.
Oh, wow.
And so he was gone, and I was like back home in my hometown again. This is where I left as a high school dropout. Yeah. And so there was a lot that I wasn't excited to come back to. I was like, oh, I have this like probably reputation, and this is how people see me, but I see myself so different now. So it was like, actually, it was hard to come back, but of course, it was meant to be. So I came back, and I was working at a surf shop here, and just feeling like I'm going nowhere with my life. How am I back home and just working at a surf shop? I went from having like this great position and learning so much to just being a sales associate. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I just was ready to run, So so that was very humbling. And it was also the greatest thing, because it got me back down to being like, okay, well, if you're the one that thinks you can create your own opportunity, what are you doing, and so work on something. So I started working on this business plan to open a boutique. And at the time, this was like in 2003 or something. There just wasn't a lot of boutiques in Wilmington. It was like just a handful, and they were very expensive. And, being that this is a college town, I was like, goodness, there's nothing for, students and people that just don't have a lot of money, there's no options. Yeah. So I was like, there definitely needs to be an option. And one of the things that I loved in California is like there was also it was a time for resale. Like you would go and sell your clothes and they give you cash or store credit, you know, and you could shop at the store. It was like kind of also a new concept. It wasn't just like a basic resale store. It was like they were very handpicking, like this collection of clothing, but you could go and sell your clothes. So that was a concept that I loved. And I was like, there's nothing like that here. So I created this business plan. Again, still didn't have any money because we were we were now in ministry and raising money to make a living. And so my husband would like come back from being on tour, you know, and he's doing all these awesome things. And I'm like grinding, trying to like figure out how I'm going to, you know, open this boutique. And he's like, what are you doing? You know, he's kind of like, all right, just whatever, you know. And I grew up from a long line of entrepreneurs. And so I had kind of seen this pattern, you know, of what you need to do to start a business. My parents were very helpful and like, okay, this is what you need. This is what you have to do. You have to have a business plan, you know. So created the whole business plan and then started to go to banks and present my great business plan. Of course, they're like, well, what experience do you have?
Track record is.
Right, yes. Being in finance, you probably know nobody's going to give you a loan unless you have something to back it up, you know? So that was a whole challenge. And then just realizing like roadblock after roadblock. But I was just like, I just want to create something for this community, especially, you know, Wrightsville Beach was just so special to me. I grew up there, long line of, you know, like 4th generation entrepreneur in Wrightsville Beach. So I was like, I just want to have something in this community to where it's like a gathering place and something to where is like, there can be an opportunity for people that are interested in fashion, just because I never felt like there was that in Wilmington growing up. And so I was determined to start this boutique and make it more about community rather than just like a store. So eventually I was walking around looking at locations, and there was this old laundromat. It had been a laundromat for as long as I can remember as a kid. We used to do our laundry there, and it was vacant. And normally in Wrightsville Beach, like retail spaces just don't come available.
Oh, no.
Businesses are there for, you know, generations.
Yep.
So I was shocked. So I contacted the owner and I was like, yeah, I want to see the space. And my husband's out of town, and I go and look at the space, and it's like raw, like no insulation, like this building's like still has like wash machines bolted to the floor. Like, you know, it's from, I can't even remember if it was like from the 50s or when the building.
Sounds right, yeah.
But anyways, I was like, this is it. I just knew, you know, it was like one of those things where it was like lightning struck, and I'm like, this is.
You could see the vision for it.
I'm doing this. Yeah. I was like, I'm doing this. Still didn't have a loan, had no money. But I told the landlord, I was like, okay, I'll come back tomorrow with the deposit. And I was like, what am I even saying? Like, where am I going to get this money? And then that afternoon, happened to get a loan for $15,000. Oh, wow. And it was totally the Lord. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay, oh my gosh, I'm really doing this. And my husband was like, wait, what? It just like, just all happened so fast. So yeah, that's kind of like how I started my business. And it was definitely very grassroots. And then did that for 15 years. And it was like the most incredible experience as far as like growing a business and then growing within the community and then seeing other, like my employees grow and being able to push them into their talents and encourage them to start their own businesses. And just the amount of relationships that came out of that experience was way more than I ever could have imagined or like dreamed of. I mean, it was just the greatest experience.
That's incredible, especially for like a brand new boutique to start and last for 15 years. Like that's almost unheard of.
Yes.
Like, you typically see a boutique pop up like 3 to 7 years, and then they either move on to something else or something's changed, and it's just not the same. So to be able to stay relevant for 15 years is incredible.
Yes, retail is so challenging, so challenging. And my dad is like my advisor, but he's also like devil's advocate. He's like, oh, you're totally not going to make it. Like you'll be lucky if you make it like a year, right? You know. And so, but I always grew up with that, and I love that challenge. I was like, okay. And so he's like, if you make it to 3 years, which you won't, you're gonna make it. Yeah. And so we made it 3 years, and I was like, all right, that's it. We're done. We're here. Of course, that's not true. It's like massive, like ups and downs and hurricanes, and you know, all types of things that you could never, you know, plan for. Right. But that's owning a business. You know, it's like things that you can never see coming, and just trying to figure out how to pivot and stay the course is, I think, the biggest thing. So
that's neat.
A lot of lessons learned.
So, question. because I always have like random thoughts and questions. How did hurricanes affect you?
Oh,
Like, because if you're on the beach and then the island shut down, like, did you lose product? Did you have to like remap? Like, what was that like?
yeah. Well, I would say being a beach location, we're greatly affected by weather. I mean, even,
Right.
you know, if it's a rainy spring, that's going to kill our profits for the
Yeah.
spring. Or same thing, if it's like a crazy summer where it's, you know, so hot
Right.
or something and people are just not going to the beach, like that greatly affects us. But for example, with a hurricane, you know, we had destruction and you know, we were shut down for months as far as like the beach. Luckily, our business was not that damaged. But I would say what it did is it wrecks the tourism. Because then once everybody that finds out coastal that is used to coming from Raleigh and Charlotte, that, you know, we've been hit by a hurricane and that everybody's in recope mode, they're like, okay, well, we'll go to the Outer Banks then.
Right.
You know, so they go other directions. They're like, oh yeah, it's going to be a mess over there, you know, so we're not going to go there. So it kills the tourism. And then in other cases, like we just had a hurricane in 2018, and even, you know, we relied heavily on the students at UNCW.
Right.
And then they canceled school for months, you know, so even we didn't even have that local support because, you know, nobody's at school. So yeah, so weather definitely affects retail a lot, which I think people don't realize. We always say that we're like we're weathermen. We're just like farmers, you know, we're just like every single day praying for good weather and sunshine, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, Chris and I both worked in Mayfair, so it was very much like that over there too. It's a rainy day, you know, you're gonna be twiddling your thumbs a little bit more.
That's right. I heard that y'all worked at Buckle.
Or Chris
I
did.
worked at Buckle
Okay.
years and years ago.
Okay.
Oh gosh, that was almost a decade ago now. So I worked at Buckle, and apparently I did my job well enough that my current boss was like, "You should come work for me," and I said no. And then
Just like everybody does to a promotion, right?
Right.
They're like, "You should come work for me," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, I like what I'm doing, and I like my spot." And then eventually, I was like, you know, time for something new.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it worked out.
So that's what led you to
Over
being a
there.
jeweler.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
No, then that's how we met. That's how
Okay.
it reads.
See, you know, that's so interesting. Were you like in school at the time or out of like,
Oh no, I hated school. I tried it.
hey,
So like I
We
didn't
get each
drop
other.
out. My mom's a school teacher. Like if I had not made it through graduation, I probably, I don't know what I would have done.
been kicked out. Yeah.
But no, I tried school. I was like, man, this isn't worth it. Like the amount of money it was costing me wasn't worth it. So I left school, and then I went into retail, and then I joined the National Guard, and then I got out, and then I was just full-time retail.
Yeah.
One of the things I liked about your story too, have you heard of Alex Hormozy?
No.
He's big in the gym space, like in
Okay.
entrepreneurs and raising money and stuff like that. And so one of his things was he was thinking about going back to school to get his master's. And he was like, you know what? I can spend a couple $100,000 and waste probably 3 to 4 years of my life doing this. Or I could take that couple $100,000 and put it towards a business because I'm going to school for a business. So might as well take the money and do business.
Right. Right.
So it's very similar to kind of what you're saying.
Yes.
I'm sure you got much more of an education doing business
Right.
than going through the school.
You know, it's so funny because I was asked to speak at UNCW at an entrepreneur class. And this was still at a time where I was like not talking about being a dropout because still very ashamed of that. And so it was kind of like, you know, tell your story and then question and answers. And the students would ask you questions. And my husband was in the audience and they were like, okay, well, what kind of education did you have, you know, to get you on this route? And I was like, oh, I didn't study fashion. I did a little bit of community college. And then my husband stands up and he was like, but, you know, like, let's talk about like where you really came from. And I was like, I don't know if you're going to sleep on the couch. But it was great. It was an opportunity because then I had people come up to me afterwards and were like, you know, that's so great that like, you didn't have the education, but you also had like this super rocky start, but you overcame, you know?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think school is so important in many realms, but there are a lot of realms where you can just jump in and start getting, you know, experience. So I support both sides, but you know, from my background, I'm like, look, you can do a lot with a lot of hard work, you know? So
I advocate for that.
Yes.
Like there are some people who learn by sitting in class and like hearing things, and there's some people who learn by doing.
Right.
I'm a doer.
Right.
As long as I find the person, like if you find a good mentor, then you're good to go.
Exactly.
Or you just actually like to read books and listen to podcasts that like help you grow mentally.
Yes.
But some people are just like, I'm going to start a business, and then don't do any of the like the groundwork or the legwork. And then like 6 months and they're like, hey Dad, can I have some more money? And then it's just
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's definitely, you need a good support system. You need a lot of groundwork, and, you know, you really have to do your research and make sure you're, you know, what you're doing is worth it, because there's always a risk, you know.
for sure.
I have one random question and then a follow-up question. So the random question is, how long did your sister keep the juice bar?
Okay, so same situation. She also got married. I have 2 older sisters. We all got married within 9 months.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Ooh.
My
bless
poor
your
parents. I know. But her husband was going to school to be a pilot.
Oh, okay.
And so he actually had to go to Florida to get his pilot's license. So she ended up turning it over to a friend of ours.
Oh, okay.
But the business did stay there up until about, I think, 5 years ago when the restaurant got bought out by a big corporation. So it was really
neat.
cool to know that, you know, it stayed that long. It had longevity. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
you know, we set up a good structure, and
Yeah.
it was able to be passed on to different hands. So that was really
That's always cool to kind of look back and see like what people are doing with it now, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
and
cool.
both her and I would go back to San Diego at different times, even when I was still living here. We're like, oh my gosh, the juice bar's still there.
Right. That's neat.
I like
Yeah.
that.
And then my follow-up question to your story is, do you still own the boutique now?
So I sold it in 2020,
Okay.
which was crazy timing because,
Yeah.
of course, COVID. But we had kind of started the process in 2019. So it was before we knew anything about COVID.
Right.
So a little backstory, owning the boutique for 15 years and then mentoring my employees and trying to teaching them, you know, pushing them into different opportunities, like social media management and others that really had a desire to start their own business. I loved mentoring. I was like, okay, let me teach you. I took them to trade shows, taught them about buying and budgets and, you know, pre-orders. And I realized that I really love that side of like guiding and helping people into pursuing something. So that kind of led into just being an advisor, and then other just local businesses, you know, asking for advice and help.
Yeah.
And then people offering to pay me for certain things.
Yeah.
And so I was like, absolutely love this. It's a passion. Also, you want to pay me. Okay. So I started a consulting business.
Smart.
So I started doing consulting a lot for local businesses. And then it started, some of the brands that I was buying from in California asked if I would create marketing campaigns and do photo shoots for them, and asking for different advising, you know, because they would be like, our product is working so well for you. What do you think that we need to be doing? You know, so it was like, oh, just kind of fell into this, like this consulting in a way.
Yeah.
And I just really loved that. And I knew that was, I started to get more and more opportunities through that. And I could see that this is like, oh, my passion is turning. Like I love my store. Like it was my baby. And like the amount of like community that came from that, I was like, oh, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. Until God has other plans. So then once we started to kind of see like how much opportunity there was in consulting, and then my husband started to get opportunities in different TV stuff that was in California. So we started to feel like we were just being called on to something new. So we were like, okay, let's pursue this consulting, and he can pursue some of this TV stuff. So then it was just one day I woke up and I said to my husband, do you want to sell the boutique? I mean, we'd not really ever talked about this because he knew I was very much like, no, I'm doing this till I die. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And
Wow.
it was so random. It was definitely not like a long premeditated thing. It was like one thing, I was just woke up and I just felt like, okay, God could be leading us on to something new. Like, are you afraid that God can't do it again? Like he allowed us to have this great experience with owning this business. And I think I got so wrapped up in like, okay, this is it. Like you got this one thing in your life and it's turned out great. So why would you leave that? You know, so I kind of had that for many, many years. But then again, I felt like this tug on my heart, God saying, oh, do you think there's only one thing you can do for your whole life? You know?
Right.
So it really just opened me up to seeing like, okay, well, there's other things out there. You can explore other things. So then my husband, you know, he was totally feeling the same thing. Yeah. But we hadn't discussed it. So the day that I said that, he was just like, yeah, Absolutely.
Done.
So things started happening really quickly from that. And we ended up having an offer within, like, we were still just like, okay, let's see what this would look like. What kind of offer would we get? And we had an offer within like the first of still like creating that we were working with a broker, and she told us kind of like what to do. And the first like week that it became known, we had an offer. Wow. So it was like way more than we even, in a good way. I think it was good that I didn't have enough time to think about it.
Right.
You know?
No time to get cold feet.
Right, exactly. So things just happened really, really fast. So that was like 2019. And then in 2020 is when the sale, like, everything was finalized. Closed, yeah. And the wild thing was that that was right when COVID happened. So like we finished our deal like on a Friday, and they had to close the business like on a Monday.
Oh my goodness.
It was like crazy timing. Thank goodness they didn't not for good. They got to reopen. They're
right.
totally still in operation now. But yeah.
Same name that you started with and everything too?
Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. So they're doing great. They're thriving. And so it's good to see, so that was a good turning of hands. And then, so that's when we moved to California and really started pursuing consulting. And the beautiful thing on my part, I know COVID was hard for everybody, but all these boutiques were trying to figure out how to become more relevant online, and to suddenly shift everything they were doing to an online. So my consulting really kind of took off in a way to where I could really try to offer advice and help people and kind of, be another hand to help people. So a lot of consulting just started happening through COVID and brands and whatnot. So that's what started my Catherine Yearwood Consulting. And my husband and I actually do it together. It's funny because I've had, different brands I've worked with that are more male focused, and they hire me, but I'm really relying on my husband. Okay.
So what do you think?
Right. What do you think? How should we, redesign the website? What do you think about the marketing? So we do a lot of stuff together with the consulting. So that's kind of been something that we've been doing together for 4 years now?
Coming on,
yes. Yeah. And we're also starting a new business. So
that's exciting.
Yes. Yeah. So we're in the works with that too. So.
Oh, nice. Is it in the same kind of general field or?
Yes. It's everything that we've learned from consulting, basically being on both sides of the industry with the brands and the boutiques and seeing like a massive need that's not being fixed or being met, I should say. It's still in the evolving right now. So we're not fully talking about it the whole bit, but yes, it is in the same field of like realizing the needs of the industry on both sides and being like, okay, how can we help? How can we be a bridge? And, I think that's always been our heart is like, how can we help?
Yeah. So actually off of that too, so we know quite a few boutique owners as well. So if they happen to be listening, what's like one or two things that you've noticed a lot of boutiques tend to struggle with that they could improve on?
Oh, well, I always advise the 4 pillars. It's marketing, community involvement, a curated merchandise collection, making sure that your merchandise is like unique and different than everybody else. Mm-hmm. And what was my 4th one? Now I'm going to blank. Marketing, merchandising, curated collection, and community involvement. I think those are the 4 things that you really need to focus on to be able to set you apart and really stand out and be something unique. And I really talk about community involvement a whole lot because I feel like that can really make or break your business.
Oh, for sure.
I'm really glad that you bring that up because Cargo District Studios, the studio that we're in right now, we're actually doing a free summit on January 23rd, 24th, and 25th. It's a virtual summit, and it's called the Build Your Community Summit because we also understand the importance of making sure you have a really strong community around you. Yes. Just from all of the people that we've spoken to, community is such a major pillar of every one of those businesses. And if we want to help other people thrive or even reach communities or build that community, we thought this was a good way of building that. And hopefully it's a yearly thing from now on, but this is our very first one we're doing. So,
Gosh, I love that. I absolutely love that because I think you guys too have such a connection of so many different industries. Right. And I think there's so much we can all learn from each other, so being able to have a summit where you can hear from like all these different industries, like is so brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. Thanks.
So from my point of view, So 2 questions, actually. 1, what drove people to start consulting with you? Mm-hmm. And 2, how do you keep bringing on more clients, or like how do you market yourself? Because I feel like I always hear the term, "Oh, I'm a consultant." I'm like, how did you get that job, and how do you keep getting more people? Not because like they're bad at it. I'm just like, that's just one of those things where people are like, "Oh, I'm an engineer,"
Right.
and it's just such a broad term.
Right.
You're not seeing advertisements on Facebook or Instagram for engineers or consultants.
Right. It's so true, and such a good question. I would say initially it was all because of my boutique, and I think the reputation that we had, and people knew about us and knew how we operated, knew our heart and desire. So that came from our reputation. I would say all the initial clients. And then from that, it's just been word of mouth. It's been one person that's talked to another person, and random connections I've made. I mean, even just sitting in a coffee shop and having conversation from the person sitting next to me has opened up tons of doors. So it's all been very organic. And on the second half, I would say I'm also terrible at marketing myself, because it is different than a business. Like I can stand behind a business, behind a boutique, and market the heck out of it. But when you're talking about marketing yourself, for me, that's very difficult. It's hard for me to sell myself just because it feels very cringy.
Oddly enough,
We've actually had 2 people on who have their own marketing agency, and they all say the same exact thing. They're like, I can kill it for anyone. It's like, but I can't do it the same way that I can do it for them.
Yes, it is. It's so wild when I think about it, because when I come in as a consultant, a lot of what I do is I'm like the outside view. Right. Like I come in and they're kind of like, hey, we're struggling. And then I'm like, okay, well, let me look at all parts of your business and let's see. And then I can see where, they're not putting effort here, there, or, where there's like, but then the outside perspective, it's so hard to do when you're in your business, because you're just putting out fires every single day, dealing with, customers and employees. And it's so hard to be outside perspective. And I would say in the same way of being a consultant and marketing company, you're so good at doing it for other people, but it's so hard to do it for yourself. So yes, I still don't know how to market myself very well.
It's like I can even understand from my point of view too. So as a financial advisor, you're essentially a consultant in certain ways as well. And every good financial advisor that I know, including myself, we have our own financial advisors to help with our money.
Yes.
So because it's so easy to look at someone else and be like, okay, these are the goals that you want to accomplish. Okay, from like a third party perspective, these are things you should do.
Yeah.
When you're looking at it from your like own point of view, you have all of the emotions tied to your own money or your own ideas or what you think what something is. Just having that third party just kind of giving you ideas and helping you, lead you along the way, I think it's very valuable.
Oh, that's so true and so good, because you get, as much as you don't think you're emotional about your business or your finances, you are. It's hard to not make emotional decisions. So it does take an outside perspective so many times to be able to be like, look, I know you think this is great, but it's killing you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting. So, going way, way back, why'd you go to Cali instead of like New York or Florida?
Because, funny, I was actually going to go to Florida because my parents I was going to go to community college in Florida. Had an apartment and everything because my parents are like, they knew I always had this desire to go to California. It was just like this thing. I don't even know where it came from, but I just always knew I was going to live in California. So I told my parents I'm moving to California. They said, absolutely not. You can go to Florida. So I was already set up to go to Florida, but my older sister had just graduated from UNCW and she got a job in California. And I was like, that's it. So that was the thing. I was like, okay, I've always wanted to go to California. And now, like, if I go with my sister, my parents will let me. Right. So I did. I piggybacked with my sister so that I could find that ticket out there.
Isn't it funny that you ended back here and then her husband brought her down to Florida afterwards?
Like, I know. It's so wild. Like the different, like the ways that it goes back and forth. Yeah. Different, roads that life takes. It's funny.
Yeah.
So when you came back, this is just like helping those people who in general are always like, if I come back home, I can't grow.
Right.
Like what was it that helped you realize, like, even though I'm home, like I can actually like redo and like change what people's perspectives were.
Right.
That mentality shift too. That's a great question.
Yeah. I think I realized, because I was like applying for jobs and wanting like these big opportunities because I knew inside of myself, I was like, I know I can do so much. And I have been able to experience these great experiences from being thrown into being a buyer that I knew I had potential. And I realized, you know, from the fact that I was a high school dropout and I was feeling like I put that on myself though. You know, I was the one saying like, oh, you can't overcome that. And I finally got to a place where I was like, hey, if you want to do anything, you have to overcome the things that are holding you back. And you're holding yourself back. And you need to realize that you can overcome those things. So I finally got to this place where I was like, you know what? My mistakes don't define me. I have to be able to get myself out of that and overcome that, and to be able to do all the things that, like, I had this weird thing that I was going to be able to do all these other things, even though that I was also held back by myself. So it was that realization of like, you can choose to just sit here and be like, oh, I'm a loser and I'm never going to do anything. Or you can just work really hard and try to figure out how to do the things you want to do. So it was just like, okay, I'm in a position now where I can go one of two ways. And it was like that, like, why am I going to sit here and just feel sorry for myself, you know? And like, it's nobody's fault but mine.
Yeah.
Like, I am the one that has to overcome these things. And so I have to rewrite my story. And I just always felt like I was going to be the only one that's going to know my potential unless I prove it, you know? So I was like, I just want to create my own opportunity. If it's not in front of you, create it. So that was kind of my feeling. I was like, yeah, I feel like there's nothing here for me. So create it, you know? So that was kind of just like this realization that was like, yeah, you feel stuck, you feel held back, and you feel like you're going nowhere. So change it, rewrite your story, you know? So it was, I guess a lot of, you know, reading and digging into the word, the Bible, and really finding that like worth of being like, oh, you can overcome these things. There's nothing that can hold you back.
I have a performance coach. What he always says too is very similar to what it seems like that you're leading down the path of, that God will always provide the tools for you. It's up to you to pick up the tool and use it.
So good. Absolutely. I do think that that's so true. Is, you know, there are things there, but it's up to us to like push ourselves to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And we had another guest on, Mike Rakowski, and he was talking about an experiment. It was a social experiment. And what so what they did is they had a bunch of women go to a job fair. And what they told them is like, we want to see what kind of pushback you get from, or kind of discrimination that you get if you have a really big scar on your face.
Oh.
So they went and they put this scar on their face. And so right before they went out to the job fair, they said, hey, you've had this on for a little bit. We need to touch it up, make sure it looks like realistic. So they went and they touched it up. What they really did, and without them looking back into a mirror again, is they took off the scar that they had seen on it. So then they went out to the job fair and they're like, oh my gosh, this person didn't hire me because of the scar on my face, or they kept looking at me kind of weird, or I know I just didn't get that job because of this. And what it was really about is when you walk into something with the baggage of some type of idea that you put on yourself, is how much is that projecting on others than what the people are actually projecting on you.
Oh, that's so true.
So like when you were talking about dropping out of high school, it seemed like that was a big step that you overcame. Of like, hey, you know what? Like, this is my burden. But when you truly overcame that, that's where the real power came for you.
Right. Absolutely. I heard a quote one time that said, insecurities are just a false story that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, so all of our insecurities only come because of stuff that we tell ourselves, which is wild when you think about that, because you're like, why would I give myself insecurities? You know, and I do have the opportunity to not have them, but it is a big challenge to overcome them, you know? Right. So I think just realizing that we do have that mental like thing that we have to overcome within ourselves. I think so often that's what holds us back as ourselves. So, yeah.
So on a brighter note, which state do you like better?
Oh gosh.
Oh, how'd it go there?
Well, and that's why I was like brighter, because, you know, like weather is typically why people like it better. So I was just curious.
Yes. I think it's the best of both worlds. Like every time that I'm here, I'm like, oh, this is such a special place. And every time I'm there, I'm like, oh, this is such such a special place. But I also, wherever I am, I'm missing both, you know? So that's why our ultimate goal would to be, you know, bi-coastal, because there's so much we love about California. My husband's from there. So of course, you know, that feels like home to him, and he's a surfer. And then there's so much we love about here. And Wilmington is so special in a way that it is like, I've done a lot of travel in my life, and so knowing how special this community is, there's no way I wouldn't ever want to still be a part of this. Right. So I would say there is no win.
So one of my last questions. So going through all your businesses, being consultant, and all the future options you have coming up, what would success look like for you?
I think success is really finding out what God's called you to do, like stepping into figuring out what he's gifted you with and using those to help other people. So for me, it comes down to doing what I can to make connection and to love people and to find a way to help and to be a support. So to me, that's what business success looks like, I guess.
Nice.
That's great. So to follow up after that question is, if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Don't be defined by your mistakes. I think that's definitely, you know, it's like the one thing that I had that held me back for so long. It's like, hey, you're going to make a lot, and I'm still going to make a lot more, you know, and I'm still going to have a lot more failures, you know, and don't be defined by that. Like, I think that's also a thing, being an entrepreneur, it's a risk, and you're going to fail at times. You know, there's things that you're going to do that will not be successful, and you have to be okay with that, because everybody has that, you know. It's much more worth it to try.
I love that. That's great.
See, I only deem it a failure if you didn't learn anything from it.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Then another quote that I heard recently too is, it's only a failure if you don't continue trying afterwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like a second chance to figure out how to redefine that, you know, whatever it is that pursuit is. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah. I used to train over at Derek Brunson's MMA and fitness over at the mall. And every time someone would come back from a fight or anything, they would always say like, "Oh, I lost this match," and they're like, "No, you learned a lot during that, depending on how bad you got beat."
Absolutely.
And it's always funny because you can really see life inside of like the MMA community, just in cuts and wounds a little bit more.
Right.
Just because when you show up, you can tell that you learn something from that loss because you show up a little bit different or you move a little bit different. And I feel like it's the same thing in life and in business.
Yeah. I heard another podcast. I think it was about a guy who started doing Taekwondo. Maybe it was Taekwondo, but you know, he's an older guy. And he said just the physical act of being leveled on his back was so humbling, you know, because he's like this very successful guy.
Oh yeah.
So I could see a lot of correlation in MMA and just like physically just being laid out.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because we're coming to the end, you want to shout yourself out? Like, where can people find
Talking
you?
about marketing yourself.
Use your knowledge to grow themselves.
Yes. So I have Catherine Yearwood Consulting. I consult all types of businesses, mainly in fashion industry, both sides of the industry. And basically I help with all realms of, you know, startup and, you know, everything from employee training to merchandising, buying, and private labeling, the whole realm, anything that is involved in owning a boutique, and then now learning about the brand side of things. I've learned so much. And so I love and have a passion for just coming along entrepreneurs and helping in any way. So that's my website, Catherine Yearwood Consulting.
Perfect.
Love it. Just shout out to everybody who's been listening to us for the past 2 years. And so, but yeah, thank you for hanging around, growing with us. As per usual, like, comment, share, subscribe, check out the YouTube channel.
Yeah, we missed last 2 weeks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Holidays.
It's called technical difficulties.
Oh,
Yeah, it happens.
you can also blame me on the holidays.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, no, it really was just
It was.
technical.
We recently started the YouTube channel. We didn't realize all of the obstacles that came along with that.
Oh,
Yes.
I can only imagine.
Yes, Tyler's learned a lot from just looking things up on the interwebs, and
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
all out there if you want to learn something.
Oh, my
You can
goodness.
find
yeah.
it.
Absolutely.
Preferably find someone who's already done it,
Yes.
like a consultant.
Right. I know. That's the benefit of
Exactly.
YouTube. My gosh, there's everything out there.
Yes, it's awesome. Man, we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.